Hi, my name is Judy McClellan, and I'm a first-year student at MIT Sloan, and I'm the student lead for the Media Rights, Pricing, Power, and Competition panel. Today, I'd like to welcome our distinguished panelists. We have John Miller from NBC Sports, Brian Rolap from NFL Media, Eric Shanks from Fox Sports, Bob Bowman from MLB Advanced Media, John Skipper from ESPN, and our panel is being moderated by Anita Elbers from Harvard Business School. Our panel is going to end at 12:40, and we're going to leave the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions. If you want to ask questions, please text Boston to 37048, so Boston and your question to 37048, or you can tweet with the hashtag SSAC at any point during the panel. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anita.
Right, thank you. I hope the microphone is on and we're all hearing each other. Thank you, first of all, panelists. I think we can conclude that we have a rock star panel today. I'm gonna jump right in. When we think about media rights, fees are really going through the roof, right? So the latest deal that the NFL announced with ESPN is worth $1.95 billion for NFL Monday Night, which is a 70% increase over the previous deal. And the last time I heard about a 70% price increase, that was Netflix, and that did not end so well.
Are you implying something there?
I'm just leading up to that question.
Okay.
We have NBC, CBS, and Fox paying $1 billion per year for NFL content. So my first question to all of you, we have the leagues represented and we have the networks represented. What is going on with these fees and where is the limit?
Nobody has a gun to our head. Obviously, we're going to make deals that make sense. And if we find value in it, we're going to step up. And obviously, we see that the NFL is a tremendous property and we're excited to be in business with them for a long time.
Yeah, look at the media rights for live sporting events have been going up for a long time. So while the numbers just have gotten bigger and bigger, it's historically, other than one or two blips, league rights for live sports rights have gone up. They're going up more right now because in the environment we're in, where sports is the only thing you have to watch live, it has become more valuable. It's also exclusive in a way that nothing else is exclusive. You can knock off American Idol. You can't knock off Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football. It is one of a kind, and consequently, it has great value. I would echo what John said. I mean, we paid what seems like a large amount of money, and it is a large amount of money, but we receive commensurate value for that, or we wouldn't do the deal. We're highly satisfied that that deal works for us on every level, including financial. And I promise that's not me.
I don't know
Brian,
why we're doing Rolap and Bowman's job. The first question up here, we're making excuses for paying these guys money.
Yeah, you should have asked how they could possibly justify
Exactly.
that kind of.
But I think it's just, in the 70s, this conference could have happened, and network executives and people observing the industry were saying the exact same thing in the 70s. So sports rights will continue to go up until they don't. It's pretty simple. If you look
and
at
I expect to be somewhere on an island when that actually happens.
Europe right now is in a different cycle. The increases in Europe have kind of plateaued. So at some point that cycle happens here, depending on how many new entrants into the market you get, because competition increases rights fees. Same thing with the people that we sell content to. As new entrants come in, supply and demand, the price that we sell to cable and satellite companies as more competitors get in goes up as well.
Brian, $1.95 billion from ESPN, is that the right price or was there more to be had for you?
That was a fairly negotiated price, I would say. But I think these guys all touched on it. The idea is that in a fractured media landscape, there's few things that poke through. And that landscape is not only fractured as far as the number of alternatives on television, but it's also alternatives off of television. And the guys up here not only broadcast live games, but they do other things. They're shoulder programming, There's other things that keep you entertained 365 days a year. So the appetite of the sports fan is not limited to the live game window. And those are also an important part of the underlying value of these rights. And so, look, I think it goes up because there's more competition. It goes up because it's creating value for the people who are the rights holders.
Yeah. I will say we're at an analytics conference. Analytics in this particular instance are completely useless. Waste none of your time trying to analyze media value. I'll tell you what league rights are worth. They're worth whatever anybody will pay. And our calculation is that they're worth whatever we have to pay to get them. That's the only. We run spreadsheets ad nauseum, and the next time I really spend any time paying attention to them will be the first time, because it doesn't matter. You can talk yourself into, well, it's not worth that. Well, it doesn't matter if you believe you need to acquire them you have to pay what it costs to buy them. It's like buying a house. You can sit there and analyze, for this square footage and this facing and this yard, this is what it should be worth. If somebody else comes along and will pay more money than what your calculation is, that's what it's worth.
So you've just set yourself up to pay a whole lot more in 2021 when these things come up again.
No, we haven't really, because we negotiate, and we negotiate as hard as we can to pay. Is that like a Pinocchio test? That somebody's having a joke with me. Every time they think I'm saying something that's not true, they're interfering with my mic.
That might be me.
But there has to be an upper limit, right? There has to be a moment where you say, this as ESPN we cannot afford. And how do you determine, or this as NBC or this as Fox we cannot afford? How do you determine that upper limit, and what kind of measures go into that calculation?
Well, there's nothing that he can't afford, number one.
We're these new kids on the block, so But no, obviously it's what helps drive distribution, drive ratings, and drive value. When we look at all those are the analytics that we obviously all use. And live sports are the best forum for that. It's DVR proof, as John said, and you have to be in that business if you're going to continue to compete here.
We're a public company. We're a division. ESPN is a division of a public company. We have to return value to shareholders, so the upper limit is determined by, we have a budget, and we have to decide what we can buy with that budget. So if we have to pay more for an NFL agreement, it means we have to not buy something else, or we just lost in a nice competitive auction to Fox on the World Cup rights. That is very important to us. We wanted to have that, and we have to make some calculation relative to what we can buy and not buy. But on any one property, for you to sort of establish this is the upper limit, that's a good way not to acquire it.
Right, we should make sure we get Bob into the discussion.
I don't have any concern that Mr. Bumble will not get his fair share of time here.
It's, there's really not much to add. They've said it all. I mean, it's like what Kennedy said. If you think education's expensive, try ignorance. I mean, sports is absolutely the killer app. It's transgenerational. It's live everywhere. It's distributed easily. It's both passionate and it's a new outcome every time. You don't need a Hollywood scriptwriter. It's must-have entertainment for fans and for customers. And these, look, we've dealt with all these people. These are smart people. Two people make a market, and they made a market.
So a question for the two representatives of the leagues. When you think about the different partners, the other panelists we have here represent either a focus on sports or a more general broadcast network. How do you think about doing deals with those two types of broadcasters? Is one a better partner for you than the other, or are there different things that you look for in these different partners and what they bring to the table?
Well, I don't think one's a better partner than the other. I think traditionally they've had very different business models where John's business has grown up in a world of subscription television. Traditionally broadcast, where this John represents, hasn't, although that's changing. So I think they do different things. ESPN was built really on the premise of 24/7 sports, and they not only broadcast Monday Night Football and do a great job, but they broadcast the draft and have turned that into a must-see event that I think, still outrates the average regular season baseball, basketball, and a hockey game combined. That's an event, and they were able to do that given their model. The traditional broadcasters have a much different broadcast model. We're still very proud that all of our games, including the ones on cable, are still free over the air in every market that they're played in. And it's been, when you combine those two models, you not only get maximum reach of your product, but you also get maximum coverage of your product 24/7, 365. So it's not a question of one partner is better than the other, but their rights packages for different reasons look a lot different in certain instances because their business models have been different traditionally.
Bob?
I mean, ESPN's distributed as widely as any broadcast network now, and that wasn't the case many, many years ago, but it is now, so there's probably certainly no difference from our point of view. I think from their point of view, that's slightly different, though, is that they have to, whatever asset they're buying, they have to slot it in. It has to fit in, and for baseball, a weekday game might be different than a weekend game for football, and so the broadcast networks might look differently at that than a sports-oriented network, even though it's a pay. And so I think they may have a different view based upon what their mission in life is, but we certainly don't. I mean, we want it as broadly distributed as we possibly can to get the best chance that most fans can see it. And certainly ESPN has accomplished that, as has Turner. Turner's as widely distributed as ESPN, so we feel that they're as good as any broadcast network in terms of reaching the maximum eyeballs.
Wow, you're really being very careful here, not scoring any headlines, not differentiating between these different partners. Let me turn it around. If we think about the different leagues, and this is a question for the broadcasters, they've had very different approaches to media rights. A separate internet arm for MLB, a focus on local as opposed to national for MLB, a bunch of other, I think, important ways in which they are different, to focus on exclusive platforms for the NFL versus much more trying to be very broad for MLB. Which one is the better league to deal with if you're negotiating media rights?
I don't think you're going to get any headlines here either.
I'm going to keep trying.
Look, I think I'll take it. They all have great attributes, and we all want to be in business with all of them, quite honestly, if you could. There's a capacity issue. We've just recently done a new 10-year deal with the NHL, which has been very important for us. It crosses over broadcast and cable. We have, a digital platform as well with them. Obviously, our new NFL deal is similar to the NFL deals that the other guys have. We try to find ways to exploit all those rights, and they're all very important to us, each in its own way.
See, look, we clearly care most about the quality of the live games and the highlights that they can sell us. And we're prepared to work with the leagues and their different models for how they want to exploit their rights and how they want to manage digital, how they want to manage their own media assets, and have successfully done that in the case of every one of the leagues. We haven't done it successfully with the NHL because we haven't been able to acquire any of that product, but they have a fine model as well. The only thing that matters to us relative to the league's own media assets and how they manage their properties is, does it affect the rights we can buy, and does it affect our audience? I mean, do their own assets eat into our audience? And the answer to, does it affect the media rights and the live games and highlights that we can buy? And the answer is no. So far, the leagues have all agreed that it benefits them to not only have their own assets to do some of their own broadcasting and their own distribution of content, but to continue to have partners with the networks. And in terms of the competition, Brian talked about the NFL draft. We had the NFL draft exclusively. We believed we would like to have the NFL draft exclusively forever, but the league decided they wanted to broadcast it as well. Well, what's been the result? The result is the audience has gone up. Our ratings have grown for the NFL draft, and the NFL has managed to create a larger audience for it. I believe it to be the same. Bob has created a larger audience for out-of-market baseball games and for digital content highlight rights. But Bob and I do deals for us to get highlight rights and to get games, and we do that in a partnership to try to grow the overall audience for baseball. So the media assets for the leagues have not really affected our business. Now, I often say, and I believe it, I'd pass a lie detector test. Notice it's not going off. If I could wave a magic wand, I would be happy if they didn't have their own leagues, right? We would rather not compete with them. We would rather that they weren't in our business. But it's okay. It hasn't affected our business yet. They have the right to do it. They have good reasons to do it, and it's worked for them.
Yeah, every sport's different. They reach their fans in a different way, and every sport has evolved their own digital strategy or their own, league media strategy differently, the way that it suits them. And you can tell the difference, between, the volume of games that Bob has and, the smaller volume of games that Brian has. The digital strategy is different. I think that it equates to, what their business is. The issue is that it's going to continue to evolve. I mean, as new deals come up, there are things that Bob and I are going to work on, I think both of us, that everybody thinks should be straightened out. And in the latest deal with the NFL, that digital side is evolved as well. So it's going to keep going because it's, we're still in the very early stages of delivery of content to the fans. And also, you talk about the exclusivity. It will become probably harder and harder if, on the ad sales side, exclusivity continues to be broken. The more people you have selling the same content in the marketplace at different price points, I think it's yet to be seen exactly how that's going to turn out. But you would like to have fewer people in the market selling the product than more.
Right, you talked about the league's own media assets, and there are quite a few. There's MLB Network, there's NFL Network, there's Red Zone. There are clearly all the online initiatives that they have, their offerings on mobile devices. If you could ask the leagues to stop doing one thing, and this again is a question to the broadcast partners, what would you ask for?
Well, clearly the selection of live events becomes a big deal. So when a great NFL game is taken out of the pool from which ESPN, Fox, CBS, and NBC can choose, that obviously can hurt us a little bit. But I think that they actually bring and they super serve the fan. I don't really see. I mean, look, nobody wants to see more competition for dollars in the marketplace. But what happens with the NFL Network is that they super serve the NFL fans. Same thing with the NHL Network and the Speed Channel and the Golf Channel to a degree, even though that's not owned by the league. So I think that that's where the real issue comes in.
So if you had your way, no live games on NFL Network?
Well, I would not want them to take the games that we obviously target for our broadcast.
Why do I feel like I'm on the Jerry Springer show?
You could actually have my magic wand, and in that case, there wouldn't be any. But there are. I mean, look, right. The one thing that I would say I don't want is for them not to agree to sell me the live games I need, and to date they haven't done that. So that's the thing that matters to us, and to date they have not done that.
Boy, it's hard to pick one thing, isn't it?
You can pick more. It's okay. You can give us a list.
No, I think for us, some of it has started to come to fruition. I think everybody on this panel, 4 or 5 years ago, thought that there was a direction some people would take, that you might be able to splinter rights off for a device this size that is not your TV, that is a device this size, and sell your rights 4 or 5 different times. I think that has kind of come down to maybe 2 different models. And I think that, in our mind, getting that back down to one model, because I don't think that, people at home, they don't know that, in the future, they're not going to know the difference between this device that's wired and this device that's unwired. So I think that that's probably, one thing that, as I said, evolve. I think it'll evolve in the right value equation for both.
So turning it over to the leagues, do these seem reasonable demands, or are these things that you simply cannot give?
We've heard them all, and we'll hear more. No, but I think what you're hearing is, and I'll just speak for the NFL, is that we've always had a model where we have multiple broadcast partners, and I think it's served us and it served the sport very well. We added to that by creating our own television network where we put live games, and so it's always a balancing act of making sure that these guys are healthy, and we want them to be for obvious reasons, but also growing the sport. really we measure our business in two ways. It's very easy. Is consumption going up for everybody, and is revenue and economics going up? That's it. That's how you measure it. And it's complicated by, at times, having multiple partners, and it's complicated at times of a world where, as Eric said, platforms are emerging, broadband's getting bigger, wireless broadband, those issues will get solved at some point. Mobility is a huge change in how people consume content. And so as you split the rights and as you cut the rights and as you think about making sure these guys are healthy but the business is growing as a whole, you're going to have inherent discussions and conflicts about what you do. But that's the nature of a league and their broadcast relationships. And I think, like any partners, we have issues, we work through them. But that is really our intent, is to make sure everyone's consumption and everyone's economics go up and the fan ultimately is served. But you're going to have some marital spats, are we not, Eric?
We wouldn't have jobs if there weren't some conflicts. That's all I have to say.
I doubt that.
So Bob, if there's one thing that you could change from your side in how how you negotiate for these media rights, or how you deal with broadcast partners in general?
I think it's good the way it evolves. We're not buying T-shirts here at an outlet shop. There's not one size fits all. These are major, thoughtful, smart organizations. Everyone up here and all their sisters and brothers in the media landscape, as are the leagues. This is complicated stuff where we're optimizing, not maximizing, and we're trying to do it jointly. And I think, frankly, it's gone extremely well for the fans, and ultimately we're all serving the fans in an economic system that gives them the best entertainment, frankly, in the world. And so I think it's complicated. I don't think that's anything I'd change. I think I would only echo or compliment one thing, and I know Brian was making a joke. This is not cable TV. This is not everyone screaming at each other. These are complex issues with lots of money at stake, and then ultimately 100 million fans, 200 million fans, 300 million fans in the U.S. alone. And so we're all trying to serve that same customer. And I think the tone has always been very professional. I know it has, actually, as it relates to our league. And it's always been thoughtful and far-looking. It hasn't been about tomorrow. It's always been about the next week. So I think that's a good process, and one that ebbs and flows, and I expect it to continue. I think Eric's right. It's going to continue to evolve, but it's going to evolve together, not with one or the other.
Look, we're de-emphasizing conflict because ultimately we have mutual interests, and those interests are aligned right now. If you look at the landscape over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the leagues, the major leagues have grown, and their revenues are higher than they've ever been, and NBC, Fox, and ESPN continue to prosper as well. So where you're in an environment where most of the major players are prospering, there is actually less conflict rather than more. I mean, we have had some differences of opinion, and we've generally worked them out. Eric brought up the thing that's been very important in the landscape the last few years, and that is our belief at ESPN, which I believe that Fox and NBC also share, is that you want to provide the content on the best available screen to your consumers. And they're going to make no distinction between watching on a mobile device or a computer or the television. They're just screens. I had a very smart guy who worked for me a few years ago who said, quit calling it a television, quit calling it a cell phone. It's just a screen. And it's a screen you carry in your pocket or a screen you got sitting in your office. And if you want to watch ESPN and the game is on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's just on in the screen in your office and you want to watch ESPN. And we've worked that out. And in fact, it's going to allow, I think, our companies to continue to prosper, that you, excuse me, in order to get that, you're going to have to pay for it. So at ESPN, we believe in authenticated television, which is as long as you pay a distributor to get a multi-channel subscription, you can watch that game anywhere you want to watch it. And it's not emerging, it's already here. In the World Cup in the summer of 2010, 1 out of every 3 people who watched a game watched on something other than a traditional television. That's not a small audience. The television audience went up about 60%, and the audience watching on other devices, 1 out of every 3 people that watched on another device. So that is a big business. It is the significant antidote. I suspect there are a lot of people in this room who don't quite believe this. I believe it is the significant antidote to cord cutting. You cannot get sports. Certainly you cannot get anything that's on ESPN if you don't pay for it. We are not providing anything for free on the internet that appears on our networks. You have to pay for it.
So you use the term interests are aligned, and you sketch, I think all of you do sketch a landscape in which you pay hefty fees, but in the end, everyone is better off because the content is so sought after. And it
Well,
seems
make
to
no
be,
mistake, we'd make more money if the fees were lower.
right. That would be a relatively simple calculation. I
But
think we can
these
figure
guys
that
are
one
smart
out.
also, and they calculate that since we're prospering, they ought to share in that prosperity, which is, I think, is a fair and accurate calculation.
My question is there anything that can disrupt that happy situation in which all the partners are getting richer and richer? What is the biggest force that could potentially disrupt that? Is it the rise of online channels that introduce new partners, such as the YouTubes, who are going to also be bidding? Is there something else on the horizon that we're not thinking of?
I think what John said is right. You know, as long as you authenticate the viewer, and as long as the viewer is paying for the right to consume this product, everybody benefits. When somehow somebody figures out a way to go around that, that's when we run into jeopardy.
Yeah, cord cutting.
Right.
Well, you know, if people didn't have pay television, we would have to create a new model to have the same level of business we have.
I just think general complacency. I mean, what, as Bob said, it's a complicated landscape. And when you're in the business of distributing content across multiple platforms, it's complicated, and consumer taste and technology changes quickly. The only thing that could kill, I think, the health of these relationships and the health of the businesses these guys are running is complacency. And knowing these guys in the organizations as I do, that's not a threat in the short term. But I think, I mean, I fundamentally believe that only the Andy Grove quote, where only the paranoid survive. And I think that's true. I think you have to always think down the road. The minute you get complacent, says I can collect rights fees in perpetuity from a television partner is the minute you start to die. And so these guys are all very good at that, and the discussions we have with our partners are always aligned in that we know that the model has to be refined and changed and better, because the fan will leave you. I mean, there's alternatives. There's alternatives for his time, there's alternatives for his money, there's alternatives for everything. And so you need to think that way. You know, Bob did a very good job, was one of the earliest guys in the industry to figure out, I'm going to figure out how you actually distribute live games in these mediums. And a lot of the stuff that baseball had done early, the whole industry learns from. And I think that becomes important.
I think at the point where you, goes to the complacency comment, the point where you cease to create new value for fans, it's not just, your ratings, you don't go to the leagues and say your ratings have to go up year after year, and that's what our model is based on. In each one of these negotiations, the networks have to get more, right? We have to create more value. Every year that Bob comes out at the beginning of the season, his online product is the best. He has to keep creating new features, or he does keep creating new features to give people more value every year. And you have to, at the moment where collectively we stop creating value, whether it's the in-stadium experience, the television experience, the mobile experience, that's when, the model probably starts to either decrease in value across the board, meaning that, at some point, our players our players gonna end up taking less money when it happens. Our league's gonna stop, taking more money, and the networks selling to the cable companies, and then also the cable companies to the consumer. So at that point, I think that you have a problem. So that's why each one of us is paranoid about trying to create new value, new features, new something.
The leagues know our business very well. I mean, that's one of the real changes that I've seen. They've really spent a lot of time and energy to learn how our businesses are running. And so when we come to them with these problems and situations, they're solution-oriented, because they obviously want to maximize everything that's out there too.
So can you give an example of a problem that you've brought to them?
Well, this weekend, I'll go to a different sport in golf. We also own the Golf Channel. We're doing the Honda Classic. We're providing something called Spotlight coverage, whereby you'll be able to watch your traditional coverage on NBC like you've watched golf tournaments every week of the year on us or CBS or whoever. But on the Golf Channel now, you'll be able to watch specialized coverage featured on a certain section of holes or a certain group or a featured group. So you'll now be able to super serve that fan on a two-screen experience. And that's a partnership that we created with the PGA Tour to try to give more value. I mean, that's an example of how they came together with us when we did our new deal to try to grow the pie that way.
Any other forces that could disrupt this very happy situation we've got going on?
There's only one, really. I mean, aside from all these, it's the economy. I mean, the consumer is 2/3 of our GDP, or almost 70% of our GDP, and he or she is a little bit higher when it comes to sports. They're darn near 100% of our GDP. And the consumer, as Eric said, you know, the consumer, he and she has to feel like they're getting great value. And ultimately, you know, you have to make sure that they can afford our content, not only getting great value, but can afford it. And so we all have a mind's eye to that, and that's the difference between optimization and maximization. And so we all worry about the consumer and how he or she is spending their time and how they're spending their money, and it has to be great value. But that is the one thing that probably we can do the least about, and therefore it's probably the one thing that we worry the most about.
Yeah, and you do, of course, have, I want this not to come out wrong, you do, of course, this whole system is not happy. You have some of the winners on this stage. I mean, there are plenty of competitors who have not had a good last 10 years. There are leagues who are not seeing the same kind of rights increases that these leagues are seeing. There are leagues that are taking decreases. I mean, there has been a little bit of the same thing happening with our overall distribution of wealth. The big increases are going increasingly to the most valuable product, which is the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, SEC, ACC. That's where the big increases are coming. So, you know, I don't want to leave the wrong impression. It's a very competitive business. You could find 5 people to get up here who would say things have gone to hell in the last 10 years. You just don't have those guys up here.
We've invited the wrong people.
Clearly.
Who dropped the ball there? Not good. Thanks
You
for
need to
pointing
take a
that
little
out.
more command over your panel from now on.
Yes, I'm clearly losing control. Moving on. If we picture this panel 10 years from now, and we think about which players stand between the fan and the content, right? So we have relatively traditional media companies and the leagues themselves currently. Who is sitting on this panel 10 years from now? Will we have YouTube be an important player, an important way through which we consume some of the top league content, or will that not be an issue? Will we think of other intermediaries that are coming up, Netflix, Google in some other way? Are there partners that we're completely forgetting that you guys are thinking of as potential competitors?
Well, I hope that the landscape has broadened in 10 years, because if there's not new buyers, then, you know, shame on the industry for not innovating. I mean, this industry relies on new buyers in the marketplace, whether it's on the league side, you know, people that can afford to buy the rights directly from these guys, or people that can afford to buy, you know, the channels that we sell to pay TV providers. So I hope that in 10 years, either Google or Netflix or Facebook is sitting up here as a strong, healthy buyer of our product. Maybe not directly from these guys, but directly from John and I. Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. I think it needs to be that way.
I think the leagues are also very concerned about the way their product is showcased. The NFL and Major League Baseball just don't entrust their rights to anybody, and I think production is key. ESPN does an unbelievable job with the way they cover the different sports that they do, as does Eric's group, and I think ours does as well. And I think that's going to be important. So anybody who's new up here better be able to produce and tell stories and treat the properties the way fans have become accustomed to, because nobody is as critical as a sports fan if it's not authentic.
Social networks? Facebook, will they be
Look,
up here?
Will they be up here? I'm not sure whether they'll be up here or not. I mean, it's interesting. Eric was laying out, which I agree. We would love for some of these guys to be buyers of our distributed product, and the leagues might want them to be buyers of rights directly. We regard all the social networks as competition for time and for advertising dollars. We pay attention to what they do. I think it's our job to try to understand where we can work with them to create more value for fans. We just announced a deal, I think yesterday or the day before, where on Facebook within your wall, you can watch ESPN3.com directly. And we worked with Facebook to do that. It means that for the games that are on ESPN3, you can watch it right there. You don't have to leave Facebook. I mean, I can certainly see that with their new platform with Google+, that people are going to consume content while they are on a social network. We just have to figure out how to be there and not be replaced, but be a part of the experience. And in this case, we are. We retain it goes to our player, we retain the advertising inventory. And so we think we're doing something that works for them. It has people spend more time on Facebook, but allows us to have another distribution platform. So whether they'll be up here or not, they're certainly competing with us.
In order for those types of companies to be, if your question is a pure play competitor to what John and John are doing, some fundamental things really have to come into place. If you have 25 million people or more watching a Green Bay-Dallas game, the internet can't support that. You can't have 25 million concurrent users at one time right now. So what you'll see before that is exactly what John's talking about, which is they will complement the current distribution, or they might be there for an out-of-market package or something where you don't need to support that kind of bandwidth. You just read this morning and yesterday about AT&T has to throttle down broadband or mobile access because of the bandwidth issue. So there's a lot of underlying technology that has to change before you see that. And I think John's point is another good point, is that at the end of the day, if you're a sports league, you're left with your content and your brand, and so you have to be very judicious about who distributes the product and how they do it. That's very, very important to us, and these guys have a lot of experience doing that. That has to develop a little bit. I have no doubt it'll be different, how people watch TV in 10 years and 15 years and what they're doing. It's already changing now with the second screen experience. What that looks like in 10 and 15 years, I'm not smart enough to know, but I know we'll be talking about different things. We might not be talking about a Nielsen rating. We might be talking about a completely different metric. I don't know what it is. But I think those are sorts of things a lot of people forget about enabling a network to distribute a mass audience, which is the business these guys are in. There has to be a lot of technological changes to get there.
There also has to be a value proposition, right? I mean, we're paying a lot of money for these rights. These guys are smarter than I am at some of these social media networks, but I don't know what the value proposition. How are they going to pay $2 billion instead of $1.95 billion to buy rights to the NFL and actually make money off of that? There has to be some kind of transformational thing they can do to drive value, and I don't see it, and I don't think it's their ambition. I mean, I occasionally do have a very bright young person who works for me come running up and go, one day you're going to be bidding against YouTube and Google and Facebook for NFL games, and I'm like, maybe, but I'm not sure I really see how. I'm not quite sure, and I'm not sure they see that as their essential experience.
Bob, you've been pushing the envelope for years on new distribution technologies and exploring different platforms. Do you have a view on this?
Well, I think there are two issues there. The first is how we're going to consume all content, not just live sports, but all content. And that's already changed dramatically and going to continue to change dramatically. And Brian's right. Certainly not smart enough to know what it's going to look like in 10 years, but it's going to be completely different than it is today. I have 2 teenagers at home, and the likelihood that they're going to buy a physical newspaper is not high. It's just not high. They're happy to pay for content. They don't think it should be free, or maybe they actually do think it should be free. But
you've been teaching them.
Well,
that's wrong.
It's been working the wrong way. I think the teaching's been going on, but I've been the student. So I think that things are going to change, and we all know it's going to change. There's going to be multiple screens, and that leads to the other thing, which is the value proposition. It's hard to disagree with John, but I think for all of our points of view, the more devices there are, the more that we can find 7 minutes of their time when they're not traditionally at a couch and they're on their way to school or church or an event or something, and we can steal 7 minutes at a time, that has to increase the value of our content. It's still live, you still have to watch it, it's still the most compelling content out there. That's not going to change. It just seems like the value of these rights is going to continue to grow as screens multiply and as people can watch it in smaller snippets and they don't need to commit the 3 hours or the 2 hours or the 1 hour. And so I think it's going to change. You'll have a broader audience here. Whether or not they're actually bidding on it, or other networks are bidding on it, or whether the consumers themselves are doing it in 10 years, who knows? But certainly it's hard to imagine how it wouldn't be more valuable and more widely distributed, which has to help both the fans and consumers and ultimately the economics.
We haven't talked much about cable companies or the regional sports networks. We obviously have NBC, which is now together with Comcast. Do we expect any shifts in the role that the cable companies play or the MSOs play, and the roles that the regional sports networks will play? Will they become more powerful, less powerful? Will they change some of these negotiating dynamics?
Well, I think it's, for us, we have 11, soon to be 12 regional sports networks that reach 55 million homes, which is basically the distribution of a lot of smaller cable companies, and they continue to be very important, but they're primarily a pro-product service, and they continue to be an important part of the equation as teams build payroll. So I don't think not only are they going anywhere, but I think they continue to be an important part of our economics and our equation as we go forward. And I'm sure, especially with a sport like baseball, it becomes critical to the growth of the franchise value and the league.
Bob, will we see more deals that you're making with the regional sports
The
networks?
RSNs, our media landscape is quite, it seems to me anyway, a boy from Milwaukee, quite complicated. The RSNs are a vital piece of it for us. And even the RSNs are they're not one size fits all either. We have some that are third party like Comcast and Fox, and then we have some that are partially owned or wholly owned by the team. So even that is not a straight line. But the RSNs for baseball, with 162 games or 150 games that aren't on national networks, they are a vital part of it. And we have to we have to make sure that their value, narrowly for them, increases, and ultimately for the audience in their local area. And I think there's a lot. I think, again, we think based on all the things we've discussed, there's going to be a lot of upside for both the networks and the fans, and therefore ultimately the owners of the teams as we go through the next round of negotiations. So we're pretty optimistic about that, and for us, it's absolutely essential, as John said. We need to have them be very successful and remain a key piece of baseball.
I mean, if the question was, will cable companies or pay TV companies play a bigger role in RSNs? I mean, they do today. They play, a role today. It just depends on what would motivate a cable company to get more involved with regional sports networks, to either try to own more or to try to build more. And is it to create value, or is it cost containment? Are they actually going to make the product better, or are they just going to try to keep costs down or use them as leverage? We always think that creating value with RSNs is a good thing, rather than creating value for us, for the team itself, whether we're a partner with the team in an RSN, and for the league itself. So I think it depends on what the motivation is. I think you'll see some people get into it for cost containment, and some people get into it for actually creating value in the space, and different people are taking different tacks. I think that cable companies look at the model and say, gosh, I would really love to be a part of that, but don't know if all of them are able to actually execute it.
We've talked about the consumer at various instances. While we're waiting for the questions from from cyberspace, my last question is, all these new channels make it possible for consumers to be involved in the content in numerous ways, both fans that are in the stadium, fans that are at home, right? It's been a very one-way relationship whereby they just receive the content. Will we see more user-generated content in the area of sports, or user-influenced content in some way? And if so, how are you working towards that, and what kind of future do you envision? I thought I'd end with a simple question.
Look, the important thing to us here is sports is very social. So there's a lot of value to be created by creating applications and mechanisms where fans can talk to each other about sports, comment on what's going on. We have a thing called Section 140, which allows people to identify that they're all at the same game and sort of talk back and forth at that game. We have conversations which get into the tens of thousands of comments when Duke and Carolina play about the game. So it's inherently social, and we think we can use that to create more involvement with our brand, more involvement with our brand around the games. Will we see more user-generated content? We put up a little. We're not, at a big corporate company that worries about intellectual property and what people might say. We tread fairly carefully with user-generated content.
We just had a really good example of something over the past weekend where one of the NASCAR drivers accidentally hit a jet dryer and it blew up into a fireball on Monday
Great
night.
television.
You're saying that
Great
was a good result.
Well, it turned out okay. But whether it's user-generated or just the act of being able to share, sports rights, we all talk about exclusivity. There's a happy medium with allowing fans to be able to kind of amplify the message by sharing stuff. And I think that we're probably, as an industry, a little bit too tight with allowing fans to share because we're not quite sure what the end result is. I think Monday night showed that fans sharing through Twitter or Facebook, but Twitter especially, some content got amplified out of Daytona, and you could actually see a pretty big uptick in the ratings because of sharing, right? A photo got shared, and then Twitter went crazy, and I don't know if people were calling each other, if people still call each other to tell them to watch TV, but the ratings went up. So I think if there was a live play in baseball, if it was a Pujols home run, or if it was a great touchdown, the ability to allow fans to share that immediately to drive tune-in, I think is actually important. And we as an industry should probably do a better job of that.
I think the fact that one of their drivers was actually tweeting from the track while this was all unfolding became a huge story in itself. And it shows how the athletes are engaged with it as well.
So we have some headline creating questions right here. So here's one for John Skipper. When can we expect an ESPN streaming service to be available without a cable subscription?
Not anytime soon. Our business model is based upon pay television subscriptions, and I see no reason to undermine that model.
I figured you'd say that. Bob Bauman, second try. Do you think a closed approach to MLB media serves fans better than the NBA, who distributes through YouTube?
We do. Every sport is different. We think every sport's doing a good job, in our opinion. But for baseball, everyone can get to MLB.com, and we have some content on YouTube. We have obviously a lot of content on Facebook, and we happen to be big believers in Twitter as well. And we need to distribute our content there, but we need to do it in a way where we have exclusive partners. And to the extent, and Eric mentioned this before, to the extent our content is everywhere, it affects everything. It affects the exclusivity that we've sold ESPN, the exclusive deals we have with Fox and other partners, and it also affects advertisers. So it's a fine balance to try and make sure that the fans can see it. They can see it just as easily at MLB.com, and we obviously put it on some on YouTube, but mainly on Facebook and Twitter, so the casual fan can see it as well. But Eric's right. Maybe that constantly is going to be reviewed. We think we're doing a lot more. We know we're doing a lot more than we used to. What the right balance is, I think we want to make sure we get to the right balance from the right side of the line, not from the wrong side of the line.
So a follow-up question. Do you feel that there are good reasons why the NBA is doing what it's doing, or are they making a strategic mistake?
No, I think every league is optimizing its value extremely well. I think the NBA is doing it well. For what they're trying to do, it's working extremely well for them. We're a different sport. We play every day. We have 15 games every day. People will enjoy 15 minutes of a game on Monday and 30 minutes on a game on Tuesday. They might skip everything on Wednesday and come back on Thursday. So we need to be reliable and where they can always find us and find what they want at one spot. It's just a different sport and a different solution. Having said that, my guess is everything's going to regress a little bit toward the mean, and so the NBA might keep a little more internally, and we might do a little bit more distribution as Eric says, as we continue to evolve. But you have to optimize based on what your sport is, and we play 2,430 games, and that's a lot of games. It means our players can't tweet as much. They're working every day.
Don't they have that thing between innings when they're sitting in the dugout doing nothing? Can't they tweet then?
See, we're getting along so well. And then Skipper just blows it. No, anyway, I think every sport's doing it well. And I think, as John said, I think you mentioned the sports. They seem to be optimizing the value for their fans and for themselves.
Here's a question for John Miller. What are you doing to improve the Versus integration with the NBC Sports brand?
Well, obviously, we're 2 months into the relaunch. We have, the ESPN folks have been the model and the gold standard with as someone said to me the other day, a 33-year head start. So we kind of follow a roadmap. But clearly, what we're trying to build is a model that's built around live events, news, talk, information, and original programming. And as live events become available, we hope to have a seat at the table. But in the meantime, we try to build on the assets and strength that we have at NBC Sports to create original content and original product. We created a property with the NFL called Turning Point. We've got Bob Costas who's doing a show. So we're moving along those lines. But clearly, it's a big challenge. And it takes a long time to get there, and slow and steady gets us into the game.
A question for Brian Rolab. If you feel that Sunday Ticket might be your most sought-after product, have you considered giving that product to the cable companies instead of to the free over-the-air broadcasters? And why are you only dealing with DirecTV?
And I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Why the deal with DirecTV?
Oh, okay. Well, we have a deal that goes with DirecTV through, I believe, the 14th season. They've been our partner since the early 90s on an out-of-market package. To answer the question specifically, have we considered a cable? Yeah, we have. But DirecTV have been great partners. DirecTV, starting in 2005, actually started distributing the product across mobile and internet, a little early on mobile, but now that part of the business is actually trying to take off, where you can actually access all the out-of-market games over any medium you want. So they've done a wonderful job with the product, and I think they've also really been able to differentiate their service with it. Pay TV, as everybody knows, is a very highly competitive market, and satellite has certain advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages they have is they can't offer you telephony and broadband at the same time. Having a big differentiator like NFL Sunday Ticket has been very helpful to their business and has been helpful to us. So I think we've been really happy with them, and we'll continue to do so, is my hope.
I didn't have a question specifically for Eric, but I think this one comes closest.
I don't need one.
Given Fox's tendency to provide unbiased news, to what extent?
To do what?
To what extent do huge contracts with leagues sacrifice or risk your ethical responsibility as an objective news provider? Is this ever a discussion?
Right for the jugular.
We feel sorry for John a lot because, SportsCenter's on 8 or 10 hours a day.
The question barely applies to you.
Right.
Right? I mean, are you doing a whole lot of sports news that I don't know about
We avoid
somewhere?
news at all costs, specifically for that reason. We do talk about it only when things come up in the context of John.
Yeah.
So,
the question is really for us, and it's a specious question. We maintain a relationship with every league, and we have a very significant news and information operation, and the two of those do not cross. And the implication that they do, or that our relationships with the leagues color our news, is just wrong. Vince Doria runs our news operation. I challenge anybody who thinks it to ask Vince if he has ever a single time been asked to change a story about concussions, or a story about steroids in baseball, or drug testing in baseball. They have not. In fact, I hear from all the leagues every day about how in the world can you do that to a partner? How in the world can you have those guys doing this? We maintain that relationship because we serve fans. We're going to give them the best live games possible and the best studio and shoulder programming to talk about those games, and then we're going to cover the leagues. And in that role, we are a watchdog, and our intention is to be there for fans so that somebody is keeping an eye on the leagues, just as lots and lots of people have appointed themselves to keep an eye on ESPN, which we accept and we're fine with, and we understand that's a responsibility of news journalism. But I mean, ask these guys. I mean, I think we do plenty of stories that you're unhappy about. So this supposed deal that we don't cover stuff because we have a relationship with the leagues is just bogus. It's just wrong.
I'd 100% agree with that. Absolutely. It's a complete misconception in the marketplace. We don't know where it comes from. I would echo everything John said.
If
It's
we
the
ever
haters.
do sports news, it will be completely unbiased, though.
Fair balance.
I can completely.
Is that a
guarantee
promise?
Yeah.
Fair and balanced.
I didn't say that.
This idea of being a watchdog, do you feel that same way about Olympics content?
No, absolutely. I mean, our news people cover it the way they see it. There's nobody who's going to get involved. We're a league, we're a network just like John is, just like Eric is, that has a relationship with different leagues, but there's church and state. If you're a network that doesn't have league relationships, for example, an HBO or a Showtime, you could probably come off and say whatever you want to and have to take the heat from the leagues on the back end. It doesn't affect us at all. We're still going to say what's out there. We're going to cover it the way it is. Costas, last night, went after Gary Bettman in a big way on the whole concussion issue. And Gary sat there and took it and gave as good as he got. But we did not run and hide from it, nor did he.
So last question to you, and this again comes from cyberspace. To what extent are illegal streams of sports events a problem to you, and what are you doing to counter those problems if you experience them?
Piracy is a big issue for us. We pay an enormous amount of money for these rights. The cable operators go out and collect from consumers, and advertisers pay for this. It's not, it's just something that you can't allow to have happen. That's why authentication is the way to go.
Look, it hasn't dramatically affected our business, but we find it to be completely unethical and inappropriate, of course. And it's just like, we have no intention of having happen to us what happened to the music business. And I do find that some of the larger internet companies are slightly cavalier about their responsibility here. And the notion that we have to provide them with the offenses and then they'll take it down doesn't strike me as taking complete responsibility. Now, there was recent legislation, so-called SOPA and PIPA, which sounds like two little characters in Hans and Gretel, which I have to say the big media companies sort of mishandled. But there does need to be some meeting of the minds here where there is some concerted effort from Silicon Valley companies and from Southern California media companies to figure out how not to allow the dissemination of illegal content across the internet. It's just too easy. I could give you 6 addresses to type in to watch the Monday Night Football game, and you could watch it, and it's just inappropriate.
So, but you're not doing anything at this moment to counter that actively?
We're taking people back in an alley and whooping them.
I see.
But,
That should be
but we have
effective.
found that we don't have enough whoopers yet to actually take care of all the people.
I mean, I would agree with that. I'm not sure it's questionable how much it's impacted the business. You could argue both sides of that. But the legislation has not, and the law has not kept up. And it's amazing to me, technology companies are vigilant about intellectual property. I mean, the whole mobile world where people are buying companies and selling companies based on IP patents and lawsuits, and there's a whole strategy behind it. Yet, as John says, if you catch me, then okay, I'll take it down. But they're complicit in doing it. I think that'll catch up. That'll catch up at some point. You've seen a lot of technology companies have started to take a different view during intellectual property and content holders, and I think that'll catch up at one point. But the flip side of it too is, and it's back to my comment about only the paranoid survive, I think everybody has a healthy understanding is you need to develop the legitimate products in a changing world, and people will buy it. They want it, and they will look for the legitimate solution quicker than they will the illegitimate solution. And I think everybody, whether on the Silicon Valley side or the content side, understands that at the end of the day.
Please join me in thanking the panelists. That's it. We're unfortunately out of time. Thank you very much.